Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for that. I'm sure there are more out there, but you know, what most people think about when they think about the word interview, it is really about employment, so job search. And there is, to use some of those phrases, interrogation certainly can come to mind. There is stress, there's anxiety. And I think it was Brian who said lunch. Sometimes the employment interviews are conducted over lunch or certainly over a meal. But the thing about this is that it is, I think that this is a really very narrow view. And as was described in the description of this presentation, I think an interview has a much broader use as a business tool. But employment or job search is really what people think of first and foremost. In fact, if you look up the word interviewee in thesaurus, the first synonym that comes up is the word applicant. And I will admit that I'm a little biased regarding the value of interviews, as the majority of my professional career has been spent in human resources, where for most, not all, but most, interviewing is a core competency. Early on, my primary focus was recruitment. And in those days, that included actually making the hiring decision for the managers. But over time, as I took on broader and increased responsibilities, the value of effective interviewing skills became increasingly obvious. The bulk of my time was spent interviewing employees, managers, business leaders, potential vendors, consultants, board members, complainants, witnesses. Some would say conducting the business of HR. I say to you, it is HR supporting the conducting of business. So another question for you. How many of you have ever even thought of an interview as a business tool? So be candid now. Don't tell me the answer you think I want to hear. If you would, once again, put your answer in the chat.
So the question is, have you ever considered an interview as a business tool?
As a business tool, something other than employment related.
All right, Darlene says never. Kara says no. Theo says sure. David Adams said no. Dale Furtwingler says yes. Tom Ruich says yes, exclamation point. Les Landis says somewhat with prospective clients.
Okay, so I think you kind of get the idea. It's a little bit of a mixed bag, but generally speaking, the interview is truly an underutilized and underrated business tool. So today we're going to spend a little time talking about an interview in much broader terms, and we'll review interviewing best practices that will be designed to optimize the interview process. Business leaders, business owners solicit and accumulate information in order to make decisions and plan courses of action. And the best ones are skilled interviewers. They don't accept the first answer that they receive. They dig deeper and deeper and deeper. And of course, interviewing isn't unique to the people at the top. Salespeople need to interview prospects, executive coaches interview clients, purchasing people need to interview vendors, business owners interview other business owners as potential resources and or referrals. And to optimize these interviews requires skilled interviewing, not just chatting, which is what a lot, I think, of people think this is all about. Done well, an interview is a powerful business tool. It's a process of questioning to get information, not to be confused with a conversation. The conversation is great, but it tends to be more informal, spontaneous. An effective interview is purposeful. It's well planned with a clear end game in sight. For example, key decision making, setting a course of action, solving a problem, making the sale, and of course, hiring the right candidate. And to be sure, sometimes what we may think of as just a conversation has really been one of the best conducted interviews you'll ever experience. You know, there are people who have inherent traits like charisma and charm, that gifted gab, they're outgoing. And these traits can make meeting people and having conversations easier than for those of us who are a little more introverted. And those traits may make it easier to conduct an interview. But that gift of gab, that outgoing nature, may also result in the wrong person doing most of the talking. So let's focus on what we can control. Best practices that can be helpful in a number of situations, including productive interviews. The best interviewers are well prepared. They determine the objective of the interview in order for it to be beneficial. They know clearly what they want to accomplish. Lack of adequate planning for an interview for a meeting will defeat the purpose. It almost always results in a waste of time for both parties. So for example, how many of you have met with a salesperson who is so intent on explaining why you should buy his or her product or service that you actually glazed over? And worse, it was clear that this person had done little to learn about the organization, the company, no real preparation. For me, and perhaps for you, this brings quality of service and quality of product into question. And when this happens, I certainly don't feel like a potential A customer. Doing research on the prospect, the company, the products, services, the individual to be interviewed allows for questions to be built based upon data in support of the objective that has been established and sends a signal that we're interested enough to prepare. The best interviewers use questions as tools. Through the thoughtful use of questions, the prepared interviewer will obtain the information needed to attain the objective by guiding the conversation. To accomplish this requires preparing an outline of the interview with questions that we want answered and inviting questions from the individual to draw him or her out. For example, does that make sense? Do you have questions? Is there something I'm missing? We want to get that individual talking more than we're talking. Now, there are two schools of thought about taking notes. One is that taking notes can be distracted to the person that we're meeting with. The other is that depending solely upon memory can result in key information being forgotten and confused. I encourage taking notes on the details for a couple of reasons. One being that the notes can help people organize and not be repetitive and help ensure that we get the information we need. You're gonna have to stay tuned to find out what the second one is. You know, people, we all, of course, desire respect and want to be heard. Being genuinely empathetic during the interview is a simple way to do both and shows clear consideration of other people's thoughts while also helping to build trust. Simply put, this is about having a sincere interest. The best interviewers are active listeners. They focus, and they lean on the 80-20 rule when thinking about who's going to be doing the talking. They ask open-ended questions and paraphrase to ensure clarity, and they avoid making assumptions. By clearly focusing on the individual's responses, you likely will find an opportunity for side trips that provide unanticipated and important information. And a way to do this is by responding to what we hear. Asking follow-up questions can take us past the canned or prepared responses and will possibly learn important details that otherwise would not have been revealed. Requires, though, a lot of focus and paying attention. The best interviewers pay close attention to and develop an ability to read nonverbal cues, which support effective communication. Nonverbal cues can provide useful information about how the person we're meeting with is receiving information. Paying attention can provide us that opportunity to adjust if we need to. And our own nonverbal cues also matter. Our own body language can support or sabotage our verbal communication. For example, if you've been at a networking event or at a gathering before a meeting, talking with someone who's always looking over your shoulder for the more important person in the room, the interview version of it is being distracted, checking the phone, although in the good old days, that would have been checking your watch, interrupting, not making eye contact, repeating questions. None of that is a good thing. The best interviewers know that the last 10 to 15 minutes of the interview or that final 10% can be the most important. Often this is when really key information is exchanged. It's that opportunity to ask if there's anything more that the individual would like to be sure that we know, or if the individual has questions that haven't been addressed. And while it's important to be aware of the time, it's equally as important to read the signals, those nonverbal cues from the interviewee. You may not have as much time as was allotted, so knowing when to begin the wrap-up is critical. You want to have time to summarize the plan of action. And this is a great technique that enables both parties to come to agreement on the next steps. The second reason for clear and concise notes is that they're invaluable to creating a summary, and they form the framework for the follow-up, depending upon memory is just too risky. And this follow-up may take different forms. It may be a phone call, an email, could be a letter to the individual or the prospect, that among other things, accurately outlines the agreed upon details and next steps. And frankly, it just sends a clear message of interest, whether that's making the sale, solving a problem, providing a service, or simply seeking the opportunity for future discussion. Another bonus benefit of taking notes is that it offers a chance to reflect upon what took place. By reviewing the information, you may discover mistakes, possibly flaws in techniques that can be improved upon. It's an opportunity to learn. As you can see, this is not brain surgery. It is about intentionality, process, discipline, and being genuine. So to summarize, I'm going to ask that you think about yourself and your planning and answer privately, of course, the following questions. When you're scheduled a meeting with someone, do you prepare or do you just wing it? Have you established an objective and prepared questions designed to help you attain that objective? And this one I think is really important. Would the person that you've been speaking with describe you as an active listener, somebody who is focused and really interested in what they had to say? Are you focused upon the nonverbal signals that are being sent? So you're paying close enough attention to know that your interviewee is perhaps getting a little antsy and it's time to begin to close and do that summary. To that point, do you summarize the key points? Do you have an action plan? Do you know what you're going to do next? So I have one last thought. Reputation matters and building relationships matters. Whether the interview is for the purpose of getting the order, getting to the second meeting, getting to talk with a decision maker, solving the problem, a service or product sale, making a difficult decision, hiring the right person, I suggest that your course of action needs to be very clear. You've got to have that objective. But I suggest to you that your objective maybe needs to be twofold. One is the obvious, to get the information that you need and to convey a message. But we also have to focus on ensuring that this is a positive experience. We need to behave in ways that lay the foundation for the future crossing of paths. A willingness to meet again, to do business, and or the possibility of seeing one another at professional settings. We should make the presumption that we will either meet this person again or we will want to meet this person again. So the memory of the interview needs to be a good one. Thank you.